Is the commissioner there as well? Members, I think time is midday. We start our meeting. Members, aldermen, commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start our meeting now. I have to make an announcement. This meeting is being recorded for the broadcast on the County Council website and will be available for the repeated viewing. By remaining at the meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of those images. For health and safety reasons, fire exit instructions have been distributed around the chambers and the public gallery. For your information, please make sure you are familiar with them. Should it be necessary to evacuate the chambers as a result of the fire alarm, you should make your way to the nearest available exit and assemble in the Great Hall courtyard. A member of staff will be on hand to assist people in the public gallery to exit the building. If evacuation is required for reason other than a fire alarm, you will be given instructions as to the action required. And we are not expecting a fire drill today. Mobile phone, please would you ensure all mobile phones are turned to silent. Thank you. Now I'm going to invite the Very Reverend Catherine Ogle, Dean of the Winchester, to say the prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. Creator God, we give you thanks for the life of this county and all that we enjoy. At this time of harvest thanksgiving, we pray for a deeper sense of connection with your creation and connection with one another. And we pray for the meeting of this council, for all public servants in the responsibilities that we carry. O eternal Lord God, from whom alone comes wisdom and understanding, we beseech thee to direct aright the minds of those who are about to take counsel together concerning the common life of this county, that in all our deliberations and decisions we may faithfully discharge the duties of our office and ever promote the health, the safety, and the well-being of those whom we seek to serve, for the honour and glory of thy holy name. Amen.
The Very Reverend Catherine Ogle, Dean of the Winchester, thank you very much indeed. Turning up this morning and say the prayer. You're most welcome to be here with us this afternoon, if you so wish. Thank you. Debbie?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillors Zilia Brooks, Mark Cooper, Alan Dowden, Andrew Gibson, Marge Harvey, Jeff Hockley, Andrew Joy, Rob McAtter, Elaine Still, and Robert Taylor, and from Honorary Alderman Frenette Dickens, Tim Knight, and Marilyn Tucker. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chairman, can I just also record apologies from Councillor Boyles and Councillor Evans, please? Thank you.
Item 2, declaration of interest. All members who believe they have a disclosable pecuniary interest, any matters to be considered at the meeting must declare that interest, and having regard as Part 3, Paragraph 1.5 of the County Council's Members' Code of Conduct, leaving the meeting while the matter is discussed, save for exercising any right to speak in accordance with the Paragraph 1.6 of the Code. Furthermore, all members with the personal interest in a matter being considered at the meeting should consider, having regard to the Part 5, Paragraph 4 of the Code, whether such interest should be declared. And having regard to Part 5, Paragraph 5 of the Code, consider whether it is appropriate to leave the meeting while the matter is discussed, save for the exercising any right to speak in accordance with the Code. Now, item 3 on the agenda. Oh, point of order. Councillor Steve Foster, please.
Chairman, just to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest, I'm involved with a company in the field of EV infrastructure.
Thank you. It's being noted. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is the consider the report of the Chief Executive setting out the outcome of the Hampshire 2050 Commission Inquiry evidence gathering session to determine the next step, what we're going to do next. I'm going to ask the Leader of the Council, please speak.
Chair, councillors, members of the Commission. This is a significant piece of work that many of us heard about this morning. Under the stewardship of Councillor Roy Perry. Firstly, I would like to thank Roy for having the foresight to identify the need for a forward-looking project such as this. This work has examined some of the biggest threats and opportunities facing Hampshire over the next 30 years and sets the Commission's suggested recommended responses, which we're here to discuss. I would also like to thank all members of the Commission for the hard work and excellent experience and knowledge they brought to the Commission's findings. And I'd particularly like to thank Councillor Cooper and Councillor Clifford from Rushmore. Clearly, this council and district councillors in Hampshire will have a significant role to play as we take these findings forward. As leader of this council, it's under my stewardship that the outcomes of the Commission will be taken forward. So let me assure everyone at the start that this document will not be left on a shelf somewhere. In a sense, it is very fortuitous as a relatively new leader that I have such an excellent document to form as the basis of what we're going to do in the years and indeed the decades ahead. The Commission, as many of you know, covered a breadth of themes: demography, economy, work and skills, environment, mobility, and rural Hampshire itself. From these themes, key drivers for change were identified, including specifically climate change, which was highlighted in the Commissioner's report as being critical. As a firm believer in the importance of the environment as a central theme to political decision-making myself, I want to start my short introduction by saying that I have appointed as an assistant to the Executive on Climate Change, Councillor Jan Warwick, and I sincerely hope that when we meet in November, that particular appointment will be confirmed. I think, if nothing else, that demonstrates the importance that the Cabinet and myself have put at the top of the list when it comes to that aspect of the Commission's findings. I've also agreed, having met the Vice-Chancellor of Winchester University, that we work very closely with the university in taking the climate change part of the Commission's report forward. The breadth of the Commission also included a focus on changing technology. I recognise the importance of digital, and I've seen dramatic technological changes in my lifetime. If we go back 30 years, for instance, rather than move forward 30 years, I checked back, and literally 30 years ago, was when I bought my first mobile phone. Slightly smaller, but not much smaller than a brick, with a very short battery life and very poor opportunity to use it. I have to say we've made huge strides since then, but clearly we have a lot more work to do, particularly in this county. Whenever I go abroad, I see much better both broadband and cellular coverage than we have in parts of Hampshire, and that is certainly something we're going to have to do something about if we're going to embrace the technological and digital revolution around us. One certainty is that the high speed of change will continue, and indeed 80% of the jobs in the future, I'm told, in 30 years' time, haven't existed today. Whilst technology offers great potential to make us more sustainable, for example, there are also huge challenges and choices for our society, such as future energy supplies and our individual lifestyles and consumption, something that was mentioned this morning in the briefing on the Commission's finding. I look forward to the discussion on this topic this morning at this Council meeting. Overall, I believe the Commission's report gives us an excellent evidence-based framework to work with. It clearly sets out a vision for each driver and areas to focus on to achieve them. The next step is for the Council to set out its response to the report. I would therefore like to draw your attention to the County Council's proposed response within Part 1 of the report that you have in front of you. The key part of the report is in Section 3 that sets out the suggested Council response. I would like to start by commenting that the Commissioner's report to you and to ask the Council to endorse the report as a basis for your response and engagement. I would also like to ask the Council to agree to take a leadership role in ensuring that the Commissioner's report is received and considered by key partners and stakeholders right across the Hampshire. The fact of the matter is, we may have written this report, the Council may have written this report, or the report's been written on our behalf, but it involves stakeholders right across the county and beyond in the two cities in the Isle of Wight. To support this, I would like to highlight the repurposing of Hampshire's Partnership Board as a mechanism for engaging with our key public sector partners. This board will also provide an oversight of delivery for the Commission's recommendations. The first meeting of this repurposed partnership is proposed for the end of November and is intended to focus on climate change. I would also like to discuss with the Commissioners themselves where they wish, how they can be involved in how we take matters forward. I would also ask the Council to agree to reviewing its key policies in the light of the Commission's findings, using the Commission's suggestions as a lens through which to assess their policies and their strategies. As set out in Part 1 of the report, Cabinet will be undertaking a more detailed review of the Commission's recommendations and the development of County Council Action Plan in response. Appropriate engagement and oversight from the relevant select committees will also be undertaken, and specifically I've asked Councillor Jonathan Glenn, the Chairman of the Policy and Resources Select Committee, to take a particular interest in scrutinising how we take this report forward. Finally, I hope you'll agree with these recommended responses that it is important that we move forward with a clear mandate and support across this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Members, you will agree with me that the Councillor Roy Perry done an excellent job along with the Commissioner. Now I'm going to invite him to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for those words. And I'm certainly happy to second the recommendations from the leader. And I also want to place very much on the record my sincere appreciation to the commissioners who gave freely of their time, expertise and wisdom in the work of the Commission. They helped us, more humble elected politicians, to work out our priorities. Perhaps in this council meeting, it's important that I do place on record also my thanks to Councillor Mark Cooper, who can't be with us today, but was always a very positive and constructive and helpful member of the Commission. It's well known that he and I are not necessarily on the same political wavelengths, but I think we both recognise and respect in each other that great affection for Hampshire. So I was very grateful to Mark Cooper for his work. Also important that we thank the experts who gave their wisdom and advice to the Commission, and also the officers of the Council, who I can tell members certainly went well beyond the call of duty in the work and effort and contribution they made. Hampshire County Council does have a national reputation for looking ahead and seeking to lead and not just follow. And I think many councils across the country will be looking at this work and asking how they too can address the issues of taking us up to 2050. I note in the words of the recommendation before us today, Mr. Chairman, endorse, and I do hope that the county council will endorse, that they will engage, because this is definitely unfinished business. We can't just put a full stop and say, job done. It is going to require leadership, and that's leadership from all of us and from the county council itself. And partnership work. It's not something that the county council on its own can solve. And I'm very conscious that the relationship with the cities, Southampton, Portsmouth, with the district councils, with the voluntary sector, with the commercial sector, all are important if we're to make Hampshire what we all want it to be in the next period up to 2050. There are many forces for change, some of which we can recognise, some of which we don't know. They will just come upon us. But they will require choices to be made and opportunities to be grasped over the next 30 years. And 30 years isn't a long time, but who knows what is going to happen in that period. But it is so important that this county does look ahead. It is a challenging task indeed. I and my fellow commissioners read, listened, debated a huge amount of wide-ranging expert evidence to arrive at the summary report that you have today. It highlights 5 key areas that we felt were most critical: climate, environment, economy, population, society and technology. But the greatest of these 5 is undoubtedly the climate change. I notice even today's Financial Times talking about the UN meeting happening in New York today. Leaders have yet to grasp the enormity of climate change. I fear that is the truth. The enormity of this change is there, and it has to be grasped and cannot be ignored. Only last week, Professor Sir David King, former Chief Scientific Advisor to the government, not a man who scares easily, said that Britain should be scared and that we should advance our climate targets by 10 years. When you get advice like that, it has to be acted upon. I'm glad you're going to report this to the partnership. It is the council's job to deliberate, to decide, to deliver. And I can assure you the commissioners will be watching very closely to make sure that you do deliver on these pledges. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roy Barry. Before we open for the debate, any question to the Leader of the Council? No, there isn't.
Sorry. Question to Councillor Manns as leader. You've spoken about not leaving this document on the shelf. I think we are all in agreement that that must never happen. Are you therefore going to be setting up groups of councillors to look at the different aspects of this in bringing projects forward that we can deliver as a county council?
Councillor Carew, I'm very happy to consider that. Yes, we will look forward as the best way we take this particular Commission's findings forward. And thank you for your volunteering to take part in that particular activity.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Before I open for the debate, your question, Councillor Martin Todd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one very specific question, and that relates to an area where we have more ambitious policy proposals agreed in the last couple of months relating to climate change than are laid out in this report. So, where we've explicitly asked that the Council get to net zero carbon and lead the county to get to net zero carbon. So can you confirm that the engagement in that policy area through the discussion of Hampshire 2050 will reflect that stronger policy challenge that we separately agreed when you're engaging with other partners in the county?
Councillor Mann, please.
Very happy to do that, and that will be done through our action plan.
Members, when the climate change motion was debated in July County Council meeting, a number of members indicated they wished to speak. Owing to the other business still to be transacted on that day, it was agreed that these members would be given the opportunity to speak first at today's meeting, and I have listed members by names and intend to call their name now speak. Councillor Reid, Councillor Foster, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Miller, Councillor Hextop. Councillor Reid, please, first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And one of the things that I'd wanted to talk about at the last meeting was my idea, which I've been implementing, of having an orchard in every school. I've used part of my county council grant to purchase the trees, and the volunteers have helped to plant them, and local organisation with expertise has helped to select the correct species. And it just strikes me as a way in which we could get tens of thousands of trees planted across Hampshire at fairly little cost, utilising and in partnership with volunteers who share a saved objective. And the schools, of course, the school children would benefit from being able to see the blossom, the fertilisation of the trees, the pollination, and then the growing of the fruit, and even benefiting from that. So that was an idea I was going to put forward. Now, more specifically on this report, we've all, I think, as politicians, been party to the production of strategy reports produced by us. This report is different. This is a report that drew on expertise from a great many fields, and that's what differentiates it from that which has gone before. It is a very important piece of work, and I thank Councillor Roy Perry, who not only initiated this idea, but then chaired it and saw it through to fruition, and we have a published report which is now before us. So we have a report which is based on expertise and not just opinion. And in the age of Donald Trump, who does not allow facts to interfere with his opinions, I think that is very important and a means of us going forward. But adopting this is one thing. We can put our hands up at the right time this afternoon and adopt this report. Turning it into an action plan, that is very much more difficult. And that's something that's going to concentrate our minds, not just over the weeks to come, but over the months. The point I want to make is that we need members of Parliament and government to recognise what has been done here on Councillor Perry's initiative. Delivery will be difficult, and as long as the financial shackles are in place that stop us from doing as much as we want to do, the delivery is going to be especially difficult. We need to use this report to show government what Hampshire, what a good county council is capable of doing, and to say to them, set us free to do this, because this is in the interests of everyone who lives in Hampshire. We have a leadership role. We are saying that we will continue to work in partnership with key partners and stakeholders, and that is right. We also need to keep this report under review and updated on a periodic basis, so it doesn't just become something that we did in 2019, but something which lives for the future, because that is the way to take this sort of thinking forward. This is an incredibly important moment for Hampshire County Council, and I think we should be proud of the work that Roy initiated and thankful for the commissioners who took part, and take that legacy forward and turn it into something really constructive on the ground.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Foster, please.
Problem. I'm delighted with the report and the way it's been received on a cross-party basis. The Commission and the declaring of an emergency is the first of many steps. It's welcoming that it's being talked about as a dynamic or living document. That really is essential. This market is evolving at an incredible pace. The whole area is changing. The way society is changing has been referenced in the briefing that we had earlier on. The modes of transport are changing. The likes of e-bikes and scooters have appeared on the scene over the last couple of years. They didn't really exist 5 years ago. We do have climate change deniers. They quote their own facts. We need to make sure that the evidence we're using is correct, which it is, and educate those who deny what is obvious to most. We also need to educate those who think mañana, tomorrow, is okay, and it's all right not to do something today. As leaders and representatives of our community, we need to take action, not just on big schemes, but little schemes. Small schemes can be equally important when multiplied by huge numbers of people. The billions of people in the world, each making a little change, has a huge overall impact on our globe. We'll be judged on outcomes, not on hot air. Passing this is not sufficient. We need to act, and actions are more important than words, and the outcomes of those actions need to be seen both in the short term and the long term. We need to find ways to do things, not excuses not to do them. Budget is one of those things that often is used as a reason or an excuse. We need to work together, as was said earlier on, at parish, district, county and MP government level, to find the budget to make the changes to our environment. We need to work with outside organisations like the Department for Transport, South Western Rail, etc. We need to use grants effectively, and we need to coordinate what we're doing, not work in silos. Small trials are good, but we need to accelerate those. We can use the emergency declaration that we've made and that some of our districts are making to act now. We can use private money more effectively. It's not down to us alone. Businesses can contribute. Just as one little example of what goes wrong, I quote school travel plans. Every school has a school travel plan. It's sitting in some drawer or gathering dust on a shelf. That is just wrong. We need to make sure that these are truly visited and used constantly and delivered upon, not just used to get a planning permission or something like that. That applies to so many more things. that we encounter in our daily lives. I'm delighted that we're discussing this today, and I hope everyone will take a positive step forward. We have 3% of our members who now drive electric vehicles, I understand. That's about a little bit more than double the national average. I hope it becomes 100% within 10 years.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I enjoyed the discussions this morning. I was really interested to see that so much of it focused on the climate emergency. I had no doubt that we would pass the climate emergency motion back in July, where I never had the opportunity to speak. Although I did wonder why we bothered, as central government had already declared one and committed £1 trillion to achieve carbon zero by 2050. If I spend £1 every second, for every minute, for every hour, for every day, it would take me just over, around about 12 days to spend £1 million. It would take 31.7 years to spend £1 billion. It would take just under 32,000 years to spend £1 trillion. 1 trillion seconds ago, there was no written history. These are massive numbers. And this is at a time when there continues to be a squeeze on public spending, and we are seeking a fairer funding formula from central government. When we go to them seeking more funding, they're going to say, sorry, we have to achieve carbon zero by 2050. Oh, and by the way, you've signed up to it. We are less than 0.2% of the world's land mass, 1% of the world's population, and account for just 1% of carbon emissions. The UK's CO2 emissions have declined by around 38% since 1990, faster than any other major developed economy. We burn less coal now than we did at the time of the Industrial Revolution. In the next 30 years, it is expected that the economies of China, India, and the whole continent of Africa are going to quadruple in the next 30 years. That's not going to be achieved in a carbon-free environment. 4 countries, China, the USA, India, and America, account for 54% of all CO2 emissions. In the last 10 years, carbon emissions from China alone have doubled. The analogy I would use is that we are embarking upon is a single person trying to empty an Olympic-sized swimming pool with a teaspoon, while 3 other people are filling it with buckets. In the UK, to achieve carbon zero would require us to get rid of all diesel and petrol-driven cars, replace them with electric vehicles from clean energy sources, significantly reduce air travel, and cut down on meat consumption by approximately 90%. I find it really interesting that why some people are against Brexit is that they believe it will result in the destruction of our car industry, our aviation industry, and our agricultural industry, yet are keen to promote a policy that could have devastating effects on the Hampshire economy and potentially the closure of Eastleigh Airport. We are told one of the ways to alleviate carbon is to plant more trees. Indeed, the World Wild Fund for Nature wants us to double our trees in the UK in the next 10 years. Councillor Perry said that the Financial Times wants wants people in Hampshire to go and plant trees. In the Daily Telegraph this morning, the Woodland Trust wants 1 million people to plant a tree. At the end of World War I, the total amount of land covered by trees in the UK was 5%. It is now just under 14%, an increase of 180% in 100 years. The amount of tree coverage in the UK in the Middle Ages was 15%. We're almost back to where we were in the Middle Ages. There are 3 billion trees in the United Kingdom, approximately 47 each, if we want to count them. Point has been made, talk is cheap. The Mayor of London promised to plant 2 million trees in London during his time in office. To date, he has planted 175,000 trees. He has to plant over 200 trees every hour to achieve his target by the end of his term. Cumbria Council recently approved the first deep coal mine for 30 years. Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat councillors voted in favour of a £165 million project as it would bring jobs to the area, economic prosperity, overrid climate concerns. And Councillor Howe's looking rather quizzical. We can find the data online if he wishes to. I would gladly support the planting of more trees in Hampshire. There are currently 3 billion in the UK today. I would support the investment in clean incineration of plastics for energy recovery. I would support the investment in more anaerobic digesters of food. Let's keep our waste in Hampshire. Let's not transport it across the country into other countries where they use it. But I have two really serious fears, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, that we're going to have an energy deficit in this country. I honestly believe that the lights are going to go out this winter and people are going to die because we have insufficient energy to meet those needs. That's one. The second one is I don't expect to be here in 2050. I probably hope I won't be here in 2050. But I do fear future generations. I do fear for future generations. They're going to be asking a school exam in 2015, what did society use for lighting before candles? And I expect the answer will be electricity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Miller, please.
Oh, I too have got a... Am I on? Okay, thank you. Sorry. Members, I'm fully in support of everything linked with climate emergency, with the emergency status of the climate change. However, I worry about the future of Hampshire if we fall in line with our own policy and ignore the fact that this is a global thing. Global warming was the word before climate change, and we seem to have forgotten that. I'll come in in my limited time, I'll just come to specific items in Hampshire. I was pleased that climate change has come about really as a part of all these demonstrations. Let's be frank, I'm used to demonstrations in my division in Tadley and Borghurst. We had CND marches in the 50s and 60s every week. We then moved on to Greenham Common Air Base. We then moved on, of course, into Yorkshire, where what happened in Yorkshire, everybody objected to the pits being closed. Now, of course, we are a country at present that's self-sufficient in terms of electrical energy anyway. We do not need coal for that. So things do take their own pace. And I'll move on to this as pace is the key. 2050 is our vision. I find it very difficult to listen to arguments saying we should bring it forward. I heard 12 years' time being mentioned this morning. This is quite ridiculous, as infrastructure takes 20 years in most places to take part anyway. We will not be able to beat anything short of 2050. I would like also to take and just follow on as to why there seems to be this obsession that transport seems to be dominating the case for a reduction in emissions, specifically aviation and shipping. Strange when we've got Southampton and Portsmouth on our corner, and also we've got Farnborough, Eastleigh, all these aviation things. With the county has approximately 100,000 people involved in employment on these particular items, and for us to start cutting emissions by cutting air transportation will do nothing except export the emissions problem. Amsterdam, Paris, they're only too happy to accept increases in traffic at the expense of the UK. I could give you some statistics, but perhaps time doesn't provide for that. But I would like to know how we're going to cope with the industrial reaction to anything that we do. It's very well the kids, and my God, they did a powerful demonstration. It's all very well that the kids can talk about climate change. Nobody, not even the deputations that came along with their somewhat unbalanced argument, nobody can promise you that there'll still be the jobs for the kids by 2050. Never mind the health benefits. So on that point, I would just like consideration given that we do not move forward faster than our competing countries. We do not do anything that will harm our industrial growth. Hampshire's success is built on its infrastructure, its location, and we've only got to develop on that. So I would ask that that is considered as part of the solution to our problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Hextop, please.
re the vision, policy and recommendations pertaining to changing climate, and thank all the commissioners and officers for producing a groundbreaking report. Members will recall at our council meeting on 18th of July, we had deputations addressing the climate emergency motion. One of the deputies, Professor Joy Carter, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Winchester, who is also a co-patron of WINAC with Mr. Tim Jackson, Principal of Sparshall College. WINAC stands for Winchester Action on Climate Change. I have served for the past 6 years as this council's appointed trustee on its board. Winchester City Council also has a trustee on the board, and the university kindly hosts an office for WINAC's operations. Its current mission statement is as follows. WINAC aims to play the pivotal role in Winchester, becoming one of the first districts to achieve net zero carbon footprint. We will build a partnership of local councillors, employers, and community groups willing to pledge policies and quantifiable actions consistent with the climate crisis. To underpin this mission, WINAC will build a strong community voice to show that the people of Winchester District want central government, local councils, businesses, and key organisations to demonstrate commitment to a very ambitious target for net zero carbon. The mission statement was announced by WINAC's trustees in June this year in response to the so-called climate emergency. Incidentally, I believe it's not an emergency as such because it's not a sudden danger. The need for climate change adaptation and mitigation has been identified for decades. The emergency stems from the grossly inadequate will to tackle the issue with urgency. Future historians will argue about tipping points in public opinion about climate change. Was it the IPCC's special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade, or Sir David Attenborough's eloquent climate change, the facts, or Greta Thunberg's Scholzkit movement? Whichever tipping point they choose, 2019 will be a key point in the historian's timeline. Yet, there is no nationally recognised snapshot measure of progress towards a carbon neutral or net zero carbon economy. The strongest indicator is per capita emissions. Of the 173 Shire districts for which this data is available, Winchester District ranks 138. That's not good enough. It is not that we could or should do better, we must do better. Professor Carter concluded her deputation with words from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and Greta Thunberg. The Secretary General said, "People feel the cost of climate change action." And he followed with the imperative, "Forget it. The cost of inaction is much greater." Greta Thunberg's words were, "Until you start focusing on what needs to be done rather than what you perceive to be politically possible, there is no hope. There is no hope. You cannot solve a crisis unless treating it as such." This is a huge challenge to all leaders and politicians worldwide.
Councillor, could you wind up your speech, please?
Whether they are democracies or not. We are a set of such politicians at local government level, and we therefore need to accept the challenge and deliver as much as we can in line with the Commissioner's findings and in partnership with as many others as we can muster. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hextop. Councillor.
Good. Thank you, Chairman. I had hoped that this morning we'd all be speaking with one voice. And until Councillor Hughes and Councillor Mellor stood up, I thought we probably would be. And I'm very disappointed, actually, that we're not speaking with one voice this morning. The Liberal Democrats will be supporting the recommendations from the Commission. We do so with enthusiasm, and in fact, in many ways, we'd like to go further. Now, perhaps here in this chamber, my reputation as being a combative opposition politician
My primary interest, you may not realise this, is about policy and it's about getting things done. It's about actions that we can take and achieving outcomes. So there are lots here where we can achieve outcomes. So let's start with the positive, because I said to Roy Perry earlier this morning, my role this morning really is to try to be, or this afternoon now, is to be supportive, yet also challenging, because that's right, to be inquisitive, to always strive to do better. And that's certainly the role of the Liberal Democrat group on this council. So if this comes over as more challenging than supportive, it's because I am ambitious for our future, and the Liberal Democrat group is ambitious for our future. So on climate change, yes, absolutely, we should put this first and foremost. And I'm really pleased that this is the first set of recommendations from the Commission. We have to take this seriously. It is an emergency. And I'll pay tribute to our new leader. I'm probably telling tales out of school here, but on Friday we were at a meeting of South East councils in London, and one council, I won't name which council they were from, quite a long way from here within the South East, said, well, we're not going to do a climate emergency, it's not really our role. And Keith Mann said, you must. You must do it, and you must do it now. And that's exactly the right response. This stuff is serious. We have to get on with it. But the challenging bit is that we then have to look to ourselves too and what we're doing. Because in this cycle of meetings, we've been recommending doing things that will make climate change worse. We've been talking about reducing support for public transport. We've been talking about discouraging district councils from recycling through our fiscal policy. Now, these things can't be had in isolation. We can't cherry pick our policies. We're either serious about tackling climate change or we're not, and I'll come back to that. So there are things we need to think about very seriously. It's right that we recognise that technology and change is going to be a focal point for things we need to think about over the coming years. We can't possibly forecast 50 years ahead to 2050. We're lucky if we can forecast to 2025. Housing is mentioned in the report almost in passing. But again, there are some contradictions here in the way that we look at things. We recognise as a country that housing is in crisis, yet at the moment we're funding our future generations on the equity in our existing homes, because that's how social care works. Social care only is propped up by equity from people's homes. We're not going to be able to do that in 30 years' time when generation rent are in need of social care. There's lots of areas of change that we're not touching on, that haven't been touched on in this report, yet we need to focus on. Linked to housing, there's a reference to building on brownfield sites. Absolutely, we're all going to agree about building on brownfield sites first. Yet we've been reluctant to talk about density seriously, because that's really the answer if we're going to get sustainable communities. Our planning policies, locally at district councils, the influence we have to protecting our wider environment doesn't move us in that direction. So we need to think very, very carefully about these issues. There are quite a few omissions from the report. There's almost no discussion about energy policy. We've had energy policy mentioned from the other direction, but energy in terms of renewables is barely mentioned. There's barely a mention for public health. There's references to ageing population, but not the implications of that in terms of prioritising public health. And yet again, as a council, in this cycle of meetings, we're talking about reducing funding for public health. These issues don't build sustainability for the future. There's barely a reference to the changes in our town centres. There's certainly no reference to the connectivity that we have in terms of our role in the wider South East, our role in the United Kingdom, or even, dare I say it, in our shrinking world, which, even allowing for Brexit, if we're mad enough to leave the world's most successful trading bloc, is something we do need to think about in terms of our role over the coming decades. So those contradictions are really important. We need to take them seriously, and we need to take them seriously right now. So my concluding remarks, Chairman, is let's not be too cosy about this stuff. We can pat ourselves on the back and thank our commissioners, and quite rightly we should, but we must recognise there's a risk of complacency. The challenge to Cabinet in October is to think about what's in front of you against what's in the Commissioner's report and say, are we actually putting our policy into practice? I suspect we're not.
Councillor Glenn, please. Glenn.
Let's start with the congratulations. Good. Let's start with the congratulations. The 2050 Commission this morning was inspiring. It certainly gave me, and I'm sure lots of others, a lot of hope. I love the idea that it's going to include youth, and I love the idea that we're talking about positive change. Roy, what a great legacy you're going to leave behind you on the County Council, and I thank you for that. I have yet to plant my tree. However, I have put in a few bedding plants, so I hope they count. That's not all I'm going to say, okay? I'd like to thank Councillor Manns, our leader, for asking me to, as it were, take this on to a certain extent on the Policy and Resources Committee, which we will do with relish. We've already had one meeting discussing 2050 Commission, ably led by Stuart Jarvis, and I expect to have a lot more of these talks in the years to come, as often as necessary. Now, this is where the Policy and Resources Committee needs your help, and I also include the help of the wise men and women upstairs in the gallery. I want you, please, to email me and Louise Pickford, who is our facilitating officer, whenever you come up with an idea that we need to be including. So, for example, the areas that maybe this report does not include at the moment, through no fault of the work that's been done, it just maybe wasn't embellished, that can be brought in at any time you like. There's no end to what we can do on this report, and we will certainly keep it alive in the Policy and Resources Committee with recommendations to Cabinet all the time, in the hope that Cabinet will take these on. Now, to the older members here, do you remember best value? Yes. What a great concept that was. Eventually, when we had our committee meetings, we'd always have at the bottom of the page, is best value being addressed by these decisions? Well, I fully expect to see in our reports from here on in, is our climate change philosophy being addressed by these decisions? So, for example, if a decision is being made that we're going to have more buses running about the place and we don't care what fossil fuels they're using, the question is that addressing our climate change philosophy? And if it isn't, we should just chuck it out or amend it. And I think that's a great way forward from here on in. Now, I've been a financial advisor all my life, making a lot of other people rich in the process. Now, these people, and I include all of you here, by the way, will have at least have a pension, hopefully, running in the background. Now, I went to a conference privately just before the holiday break, and investment houses attended. Over £2 trillion worth of investment was represented at this meeting. And that meeting shortly became a meeting on climate change. And every single one of those investment houses has signed up to a charter to ensure that when they're investing people's money, they're checking to make sure that it's going into the right places and not, for example, helping South American countries burn more jungle. Now, they have to do this.
Councillor, could you please wind up your speech? Thank you.
If they don't do that, we won't be using their money. So, ladies and gentlemen, I commend this report. I commend that you get in touch with us, and please don't ever stop emailing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glenn. Councillor Frankham, please. Thank you.
Thank you. On the whole, I think this is a wonderful report, and an awful lot about climate change. But I think one of the biggest climate changes we need is how the disabled are being able to feel. As a disabled person, very often I don't feel equal, I have to keep on reminding that I need certain needs. Take today, for instance. 4 trips today from the other building to here if we go on lunchtime. That's very difficult and very painful for me. We're not being considered. When they had the chairman's lunch, it was upstairs. 2 people on walking sticks and crutches had to go up the stairs. One couldn't go up. So I think it's probably because you just don't think about the disabled. I apologise because I didn't until I became disabled. I didn't realise what a difficult life and very simple things can be, like just going out for a walk or getting about, getting transport. May I suggest that with this commission that you probably get a group of people who are disabled and listen to their voices, listen to what the troubles that we have. Sometimes there's very simple solutions, but I just don't feel people really listen. I don't want your sympathy. I want to be equal. And that's something I hear from many, many disabled people. So we have a fast-growing elderly population, and so it's been predicted that many more will reach 100. So can we please start thinking and start talking to the disabled? What are their needs? Don't talk above our heads. Talk to us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frankham. Before I invite the next member to speak, announced this morning that we're going to have a lunch break by 1:30. Would you like to have a half an hour? Because we got 11 speakers to speak to this item. An hour break. So we have a 1:30, half an hour break and come back? Okay, we'll have an hour. It is your decisions, not mine. So, okay, you can have an hour. I'm quite happy to carry on. Councillor Westbrook, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things before I start. A little bit disappointed to hear Councillor Foster talk about the school travel plans collecting dust in his division. I can tell you for sure that in my division they do not collect dust, and the officers, teachers, parents and children that work hard on those really do make an effort for them to work, even though it might not always be a good outcome in the end, but they do, and they certainly aren't collecting dust. I wholeheartedly support Councillor Perry planting trees, starting tomorrow, I believe. I've planted thousands of trees. I was in a fortunate position of making a career out of it, which is good. So, Chairman, I'm pretty sure that when Councillor Perry set up this commission of inquiry, a vision for Hampshire 2050, that he wouldn't have envisaged the uncertainties that now lie beyond October the 31st, let alone what may be around the corner for 2050. But that said, it's very sensible and important that we plan for the future, whatever that future might look like, and in fact ensure that we all have a future. This council, having declared a climate emergency, now needs to continue on how we develop with that with haste. That important work on climate change needs to appear through this vision like a name through a stick of Blackpool rock. The focus on what we think might happen in the future, how that will affect or impact what we do, and how everyone can work together and react to that change are quite rightly the main points covered by this commission. As a starting point for any vision document, we need to initially set out its main structure, aspirations and objectives, and yet give ourselves the opportunity to discuss, challenge and hone its outcomes along the way. And in that respect, it has to be a living document. The detail on each of the strands will come together along the way, but this initial structure needed to pick up the important points that we already know from listening to the contributors to this work so far, and I believe this document does just that. We do need to recognise, tackle and prevent areas of deprivation appearing on our divisional maps in 2050, and as the young contributors have said, eradicate the need for food banks in the world of 2050. There has to be that good access to education and skills for everyone. Business needs encouragement to build an economy in our Hampshire towns and cities, thereby reducing the need for commuting and focusing the future for our young people right here in Hampshire. That in turn leads on to other forms of transport and a need for housing, but the right housing, not, as one contributor stated, just permitted development that can turn into the slums of the future. And of course, we will need to invest in an ever-growing ageing population going into 2050. I do have a vested interest in that, Chairman, as on my workings out, I'll be around about 93 by then. We must also remember, as the report points out, that our districts and our cities and neighbours will focus heavily within this work. And I think the leader made a good point that the districts will have a significant role to play in this. Partnerships will be extremely necessary and vitally important. Speaking as a Basingstoke Central Councillor and as a Basingstoke Borough Councillor, I know that Basingstoke Council have already adopted their own vision document called Horizon 2050. This has already been endorsed by local business, the arts, the voluntary sector, Hants Fire and Rescue, NHS colleges and the University of Winchester, to name but a few. That vision will surely need to be part of this vision too, in that we understand fully the local picture in Basingstoke, yet avoid duplicating costly work. I appreciate that needs to be a two-way thing though. This report is an excellent starting point, and I thank the Commissioners and all contributors to date for their hard work. Having considered this report on the outcomes of the Commission, I'm happy to support the key principles as set out in the recommendations and look forward to engaging fully on the detail in future select committees, and we've already heard that P&R will be picking it up, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bolton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say a few words. In the Commission's report, as all of us have seen this morning, and we've discussed so far, it particularly highlights the challenges of climate change and associated flooding risks. Now, I couldn't help but think back to the winter of 2013-14 and the very heavy rains and the flooding that occurred in Hampshire. Now, I'm very pleased to say that this council, through our Environment Department, works very closely with the Environment Agency and our two coastal unitary authorities in Portsmouth and Southampton on flood risk alleviation projects. So I'd like to take this opportunity, Stuart, to thank your officers in the Environment Department for the work that they do. And on the report itself and the work of the Commission, I fully support the report and the recommendations it makes to address future challenges, and particularly in attempting to address the challenges associated with the climate change emergency and its effects, such as the heavy rains that we saw in 2013-14. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Todd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And like so many others, I welcome the work that's been done in this report and the recommendations it puts forward. Indeed, parts of it I think I find challenging and stimulating and will drive real change in the council, which will be good. There was one area, as I highlighted earlier, where I think we are currently more ambitious in our policy objectives, and that is the area of climate change. And it is incredibly important that we don't lose sight of setting a specific goal for the council and for the county to achieve net zero carbon. I was slightly surprised that the debate raised the question as to whether we should be discussing this, because apparently it's a global issue and therefore outside our scope. Well, I've got some very exciting news for those councillors, which is Hampshire is actually part of the globe. And on a serious note, this is such a problem that it will need action at every level, global, national, regional, county, district, smaller communities, towns and villages, households, and as individuals. And we need to take our part in making sure that the change happens that absolutely has to happen. Maybe also, it will perhaps, because of that need for global action, because it's not a problem we can solve in Hampshire alone, you may understand, perhaps, why we in this party talk so much about the importance of a collaborative and positive relationship with our neighbours in Europe and globally. There are areas where I think the evidence that was presented wasn't fully reflected in the recommendations, and where I certainly, from what I've heard today and from what I've seen in the report, feel like we need to adopt a more assertive agenda. And in particular, I was very struck by the reference that was made by the commissioners in the discussion today and in the report about the challenge of pockets of deprivation. And the recommendation that sits against that just says we need to reduce absolute levels of deprivation, and talks a lot in other parts of the paper, in the population and society part of the paper, about place-based approaches. And I would like, and I will certainly be advocating in terms of our action planning, that we integrate those two and that we focus our place-based activity on those areas of deprivation and set it as a real challenge for this council to tackle all the different factors that are holding back our fellow citizens in those parts of the county. And so that was one where I thought the evidence was strong, and I would like us to take a stronger line than was laid out in the recommendations. And then there are areas which they've raised and where they're making recommendations which I feel are genuinely new and we don't talk about nearly enough. And I was very struck by the points they were making about making Hampshire a place where younger people feel able to stay after studying, feel able to build their lives, feel able to contribute, and that they don't feel that they're priced out of the area, that they don't have the transport links that they need, and that we think seriously about what we do in order to ensure that every age group feels able to live here and that they have a future here. So it sets forward a motivating vision. The challenge remains, and this is, which is, I was sitting through the discussions of T21 cuts plans, and if I'm honest, when we're in that space, it feels like a very different universe. And that will be a very real challenge that we have to face. How do we reconcile the two? How do we ensure that the partnership working that was referred to engages with MPs and ministers and says action needs to be taken? But the start point to addressing that is us as a county council, knowing what we want to do. And I think this paper enables us to align around that, gives us the position to influence others to achieve it, and hopefully will drive really positive change for us here in Hampshire.
Councillor. Councillor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't expect to talk. I thought everybody was going to agree on this. Then I heard a few negative comments saying that we're too small. Whatever we do is going to be too little. Mr. Chairman, we heard some examples of why we're too little. 60 years ago, approximately, a young lady sat down on a bus. Her name was Rosa Parks. She helped change a nation, one person. Around the same time, just a bit longer, a man stood up to sing and helped to change the world of music. His name was Elvis Presley. Last year, a young girl sat down alone outside her school protesting about climate change. This year, the whole world has heard of Greta Thunberg. Mr. Chairman, members, do not believe that one person cannot change the world, because it's the only thing that has ever done so. One person has had an idea, in this case, Roy. I'm not going to say he's going to change the world, but he may change Hampshire. And that person has formed a small group, and that group changes things. It's the only thing that it ever does. We have to do what is right, regardless of what other people are doing. And that's what we as a council are trying to do. What is right for now and the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Porter, please. Oh.
Work, oh, there it is. Thank you. And I had the privilege of listening to many of the Commission meetings, and it was fascinating to hear the whole story, and to particularly the AAI one, which was really very thought-provoking. I'd just like to raise a few questions and a few points for debate, really. I'm also very pleased to be supporting it in principle. And I was going to raise the point that Councillor Franken made about people who have disabilities. And I think it's really important that we think of that group, not just as an add-on, but in every single thing we do. The second group is the people who run our 24-hour economy. We're too keen to make sure that we're very, very aware of those people who operate between the normal 9 to 5 day, the people that want to catch a bus, the people that want to move around, the people that want to travel along our streets. But we don't always think about how they're going to manage if their daily work is between 10 o'clock in the evening and 10 o'clock on 6 o'clock the next morning. Having done nights myself, I know how different that world feels. And we should be very mindful of it if all of our citizens are going to get the care they need, not just for themselves, but giving care to others. So I'd like us to think particularly about that group. The third is about faith. One hopes there will still be faith in 2050. And that's something that didn't come out this morning. And we had Reverend Ogle and we had Bishop David there. And they kept very quiet. But we do know that we have a multi-faith environment now. And what 2050 will be like is going to be another unknown, really, for all of us. But we do need to engage with all of those communities if we're going to see behavioural change on climate change and other things from all of those people. And the fourth group really was, we had the children in from Thorndon, and they gave a really powerful presentation on the day, and again today. But it could be an opportunity, in actual fact, to set up a 2050 commission with young people who are going to be in their prime of life by 2050. Because at 95, I don't think I will be quite in that prime. Thank you.
Well done. Councillor, I mentioned earlier on that we're going to have a lunch break at 1:30. But I've been told the canteen closes at 2 o'clock. So with your approval, if we have a break now, 1:15, and if you come back for 2:15, we start the proceeding again. Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Carew.
Members, firstly, I'd like to echo our thanks to the Commissioners and to congratulate Councillor Perry, who sadly isn't here, for his, at the moment, for his vision. Is he? Sorry, Roy, I was expecting to see you over there. Sorry, force of habit. Yes. Right, so I would like to thank Councillor Perry for his vision, and I think this landmark document leaves a great legacy for our future. I made 2 key points this morning. Firstly, that climate change is so serious that action by 2050 will be too late. The government's own chief scientific advisor, Professor Ian Boyd, only last week warned us that it is happening faster than we think and urgent action is needed now to avoid disaster. We are already taking action with our estate and our vehicle fleet, but there's so much more we could and should be doing. One of the commissioners said this morning we don't need to reinvent the wheel. He's right, we can take best practice from other councils. An orchard, an environmental study area, solar panels on each Hampshire school would be a good start. As I said this morning, we must look at public transport, but we must also look at our own energy supply. We must look at planning, our pension fund, our sinks, the recycling rates, and yes, that means tackling Project Integra. Planting trees is a great start. In East Hampshire, we've already announced plans to deliver 120,000 native trees, 1 for each resident. So why not use county land to create new woodlands linking our ancient forests? Members, as an ecologist, I tell you now that it is critical to understand we are not just dealing with climate change, but the twin disasters of climate change and mass extinction. Their importance overrides everything we do. The evidence given to the Commission by Hampshire Wildlife Trust is stark. Less than half of our SSSIs in Hampshire are in favourable condition. Our network of island nature reserves are not sufficient to deliver the government's project for delivery for species recovery. Visitor pressure is causing negative impacts and disturbance to wildlife on the very wildlife areas we are trying to protect, so we need more of them. Our heathlands, our meadows, our chalk downland, and even our famous chalk rivers such as the Testanitchin are under threat. Species such as the water vole have decreased in this county by 30% in the last 10 years, and the silver wash fritillary is on the edge of extinction here in Hampshire. But it doesn't have to be like this. It's not about just converting hearts and minds. Given the recent climate change demonstrations, I would say the public are well ahead of the politicians. The issue is bigger than all of us. It is about the very survival of our species and the world around us. Adopting this landmark document today is a great start, and it is up to us as a council and individual councillors to lead by example, to put our political differences aside and work cross-party to deliver results. Only then can we ensure that this wonderful county of ours, that we are privileged to call home, is safeguarded for future generations. Members, I support the document.
Thank you, Councillor Carew. Councillor Carpenter, please.
Thank you very much. I've just written an article for residents about the future decline of our trees across the country, actually, through disease and future climate change. Some of the species won't survive. So we do need to be planting trees, but we need to actually plant the right species. So I'm hoping that the EA will give us guidance on which species we should be planting in the future. I fully back the findings of the Commission of Inquiry. I think it's a fantastic piece of work, as other people have already said. It gives the County Council a clear vision and sound foundation on which we can build county policy in all sorts of areas, including climate change and environment. Re-climate change, I would very much like to be involved on that working group with Councillor Warwick, who I'm sure do a really great job in that role. But our children and young people don't want us to wait to act, so I'm not going to. Next week, this weekend, I'm going to my party conference and I'm going to look at some great ideas from other councils and organisations represented there. There are always great ideas there. There are some great environmental initiatives already underway in our council divisions and our schools. And as a community leader, which we all are, I'm going to go back to my area and initiate a few projects myself and find out how I can better support and help enhance the work of existing groups. I'm going to start right now and build this work into my calendar, and I invite others to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor.
Chairman, good, it's on. I'd like to add my thanks to the Commission and to Roy and to the Commissioners for the good work they've done, and I won't repeat the broad areas of agreement that we all have about just about everything in the Commission report. There's a lot there that will guide the County Council and I hope others within the Hampshire community over the coming years. I just wanted to add my voice to the issues about climate change and just to make a couple of points that haven't previously been made. I hear those who say the issue isn't proven yet, but I think of a hedgehog or a rabbit in the road, looking at the two lights of a juggernaut hurtling towards it. And maybe it's a pair of rabbits, and one says to the other, well, we better not get out of the way just in case it's not a juggernaut. I don't understand that logic. It could be a juggernaut. In fact, it is a juggernaut, and we need to deal with it. And when people talk about a tipping point, I wonder how many people really understand what that means. If you think of someone who smokes a cigarette sitting in an armchair and a little bit of ash floats down to the side of the armchair and they go off to bed and it smoulders there for a while, we're in the smouldering stage at the moment, there will come to a point where the fire will start and then the fire will roar away. And it gets to a point where that chair cannot be saved and probably the house that the chair is in. That's what the tipping point is. It's the point beyond which our planet cannot be saved. And if you've seen Professor Brian Cox talking about this, where he's shown what's happened on other planets throughout the universe, where the seas evaporate into space and life stops. That's what happens after the tipping point. Okay, it might be a very long way away. We just don't know how far away it is. And once you've reached it, you've left it too late. That's why it's so important to treat this issue so seriously. To me, Chairman, it's not about Hampshire saying, well, let's wait until everybody else does it and then we'll join in. It's about Hampshire doing what it's very good at doing, which is provide leadership. And provide leadership in association with all those others who want to provide leadership. I don't know where I saw it, whether it was on TV this morning or on social media, but I saw an image of solar panels rolling across the hills as far as you could see, miles and miles of solar panels. Do you know where they were? They were in China. So let's not kid ourselves that other places are not doing what they can too. And let's be at the forefront of the leadership to save our precious planet, to see off this climate challenge and do what's right so that all the other things that are in this document can actually come to fruition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Jan Warwick, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased indeed to receive the Commissioner's report and in particular to see that they've put climate change as their top priority. It's really important. As you're all aware, we are already experiencing the impacts of climate change. Warmer and wetter winters, hotter and drier summers, increased flood risk, and the sea level rising with severe storms. The Committee on Climate Change said in its 2019 progress report to this Parliament that UK action is behind what is needed to meet our targets. The committee also suggested that action to prepare individuals, businesses and the natural environment for global warming is less ambitious than it was 10 years ago. I am therefore delighted that our Commission has put this at the top of our agenda. Hampshire County Council and its partners will demonstrate leadership and embed climate change mitigation and resilience into all our key policy areas to effectively enable our communities to tackle this issue. It must become mainstream or business as usual for us, for all of us, if we are able to meet these challenges effectively. As the leader said, the Council's declaration of a climate change emergency begins this process and establishes this as a top priority for this Council. We have already taken an innovative and robust approach to reducing our own carbon emissions since Cabinet approved a strategic plan back in July 2010. Over the last 9 years, a significant reduction of over 40% has already been achieved. However, we all know there is much more to do, particularly in reducing emissions and building resilience across our county. We will therefore now develop both a framework for our corporate climate change strategy and, most importantly, an action plan. This strategy will need to cover a whole range of areas across every division, reducing emissions from our own assets and activities. A lot of work has already underway in this field, but further work is needed around staff travel and sustainable procurement. We need to try and reduce emissions across the wider Hampshire area. We know that the highest emissions from transport and domestic electricity, so we will need to look again at our public transport policies and to learn lessons from our airports at Tag Farnborough, which is carbon neutral, using biofuels and carbon offsetting programs. Building resilience within our own assets and activities, flood and heat-proofed infrastructure in our schools, our care homes and across our highways. Building resilience across the wider area and community of Hampshire. As Councillor Todd alluded to, we need to work with our districts and strengthen their local plans, not only for sustainable housing, but to build proper communities and to tackle poverty. As our Thorndon pupils alluded to, again, using social media, we're quite good at that, but we need to continue to build on it and engage the public with both mitigation and resilience. We need to look at behavioural insights and change behaviour to reduce the use of precious resources, energy, waste and water. We are rightly working already with key partners such as the Woodland Trust and the Forestry Commission to develop a strategic alliance for our work with trees, planting the appropriate species of trees across Hampshire. There will be effective and meaningful engagement across Hampshire with the repurposed Hampshire Partnership Board. And as Councillor Huckstep mentioned, we are already engaging with key experts and key community groups to begin early engagement and ensure that we use their wider expertise and priorities. These include the Friends of the Earth, the Winchester Action on Climate Change, who are sitting upstairs, and the University of Winchester. The Commission highlighted that this agenda will require a broad range of measures and step changes in lifestyle, in policy, in strategy and investment decisions across all levels of our...
Councillor, would you wind up your speech, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor House mentioned our ability to communicate, to educate and encourage. We need to do this and make these changes for all our partners and communities, and this will be fundamental to making a change. Chairman, I'm extremely encouraged by both the Commission and the declaration of a climate change emergency. I believe it clearly demonstrates the importance that this Council is giving to these issues, and we have to take a lead and we have to act now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now the Deputy Leader, please.
There we go, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Councillor Warwick on her appointment as Assistant to the Executive on Climate Change. I won't mention what I said last time. Still haven't made the cake yet, for those of you that were here. As Executive Member for ETE, the Commission of Inquiry has been an extremely significant piece of work covering many areas within my portfolio. And I was very pleased to attend most of the evidence hearings. The environment is vitally important and arguably Hampshire's greatest asset. So I'm pleased to see that there's been recognised by the Commission and is an important focus for their thinking. Commissioners expressed the need to protect, retain and enhance the special features and the unique character of Hampshire into the future. Our environment, rural and urban, will come under increasing pressures from growth and increased housing, infrastructure, employment space, agriculture, energy production, whilst the changing climate continues to change and at an accelerating rate. These factors are causing incremental and noticeable annual declines across habitats and species, and potentially starting to change the face of both our urban areas and the countryside of Hampshire. Hampshire's younger generation has also identified environmental stewardship as a priority, and with it a requirement that we should be conscientious about actions which could negatively impact on the environment in the future. On a personal level, I have close family ties with farming. I also ran a nursery business for many years, which makes me even more passionate about our landscape and countryside and how it will be impacted by climate change and the challenges that we all face. There are so many complexities in managing our land and so many demands that we have to balance. Even the idea of planting lots more trees, including street trees, is complex and needs to be carefully thought through and managed. I've said previously, and lots of people have spoken about trees today, the right species in the right locations. So this is where my nursery bit comes in. Not too many Cornus controverta variegatas need to be planted, or Dicksonia antarcticus. Come on, that deserves a little bit of a, doesn't it? Like that? Thank you very much. This side did. But perhaps more Quercus and Aeschylus species. So Quercus and Aeschylus. You agree with chestnut as well? I would like to emphasise that climate change and environment are top priorities for my portfolio, and this will be reflected in the strategy action plans that we are working on. The changing environment does not only relate to the natural environment, but as the built environment is changing too, and we need to be focusing on both. As the executive member with direct responsibility for much of Hampshire's physical infrastructure, this is of great importance to me. Within our built environment, there are also competing demands. Home design is not keeping pace with our fast-changing lives. Technology and expanding and contracting families. Road traffic is increasing. Traditional retail is in decline, and we face more frequent extreme weather events into the future. There are no simple solutions, but I believe place shaping is one of the most important tools the Council has to truly influence the future of Hampshire. We want Hampshire to be a great place to live, where the economy prospers and great communities thrive. The place shaping agenda requires for us to find what is distinctive and unique in the localities we serve, so that we can package and repackage them to be adaptable to the drivers for changes highlighted by the Commission. Our services also need to be adaptable. We need high-performing, affordable and accessible services to meet public needs, including as a minimum universal digital connectivity, accessible transport systems and transport networks to increase accessibility and active travel, alongside safe, accessible and convenient green spaces to support the health and well-being. As the Commission brought into stark focus, the structure of our society is also changing, with the age of 65+ age range growing at the fastest rate and those 85+ set to double in the same time frame. This will have a significant impact upon the workforce and on demand for services, including health, supported housing and social care. Although Hampshire's economy is currently performing well, with levels of economic prosperity and household incomes in Hampshire above the national average. We cannot be complacent. The digital revolution and global economic forces will bring huge and fast-paced changes to Hampshire's economy, and we must be ready to respond. I know very well the challenges facing small businesses, having run one myself. The pace of change is relentless and requires adaptability and flexibility. We will need to capitalise on the priorities, support for key sectors, the digital creative, aerospace, defence and marine, to build on the existing strengths in these areas and transition to a more knowledge-based economy. Future workers need to be equipped with the skills demanded by the digital revolution, and we need to better anticipate the need to reskill the existing workforce. To do this, we will have to influence and invest in the right skills needed for the future, such as interpersonal skills, communication, creativity, innovation, and work readiness. It is essential that we target this upskilling to maximise opportunities for employment and inclusion, to tackle the issues of deprivation, poverty, and economic exclusion. Inclusion and diversity were the key themes of the Commission. It is important that Hampshire is seen as a place where everyone is welcome. Forbes have shown that companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry median. If it applies to companies, then the same must apply to society. I believe that we need to prioritise diversity and inclusion across the board. I believe, for example, that the role of women in all aspects of society need to be proactively invested in if we are to maximise economic and social capital in Hampshire. Nesta, the Global Innovation Foundation, presented at the Commission and stated that over the last 30 years, less than 7% of all patents globally were filed by women. I mean, this is quite shocking. Statistics also show that women, ethnic minorities and people from lower backgrounds are underrepresented among our innovators. Dame Wendy Hall also gave an inspiring presentation at the Commission. She said that we have to have diversity at the core of development of AI to ensure that there is no built-in bias and we have thoughtful application of technology. I think as a council, we have a significant role to play in these areas, and we must do so fully. There are so many other areas of the Commission that I could talk passionately about today, and I've just chosen a few of these to talk about or bring to your attention today. For me, the Commission has been eye-opening and inspirational. I'm extremely proud that the Council has invested in this work, and I'm committed to seeing that we take this forward, the very important issues that it has highlighted. But we know we cannot do this on our own. We will need to work with our partners, businesses, communities to establish effective ways action can be taken and be realised. We must act as one. We must join up the dots if we're going to succeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Humby. Now I'm going to call upon Councillor Keith Mann, Leader of the Council. Please sum up the debate.
Chair, councillors, I hope you feel as I do that this has been a very full and illuminating debate. We've had 18 speakers, and I hope you won't mind if I don't mention each individual one of you. I would just like to mention two people. First of all, my deputy, for making such an excellent speech to bring the full range of what the Commission actually produced over and above what is clearly, as a result of the debate this afternoon, what most people think is the most important part of the Commission's report, namely the environment and specifically climate change. There's one other person I'd like to mention, and that is a member of our staff, and that is Titra Nadaraja, who has done so much of the work behind the scenes for the Commission. I'm certain you'll all join with me in thanking her for doing the work, as I say, behind the scenes that has had a tremendous effect on the report itself. Let me end on a personal note. Part of my degree was in geography, but more importantly, I've spent 42 years as a pilot, flying above the surface of the planet. If you've done that, you get a completely different perception of what is going on below you. I've flown over deserts, I've flown over shanty towns, I've flown over huge scars in the countryside as a result of mining activity. When you've done those things, you can never actually forget exactly what our planet is all about. So be in no doubt, councillors, I'm right behind this report, and I will follow it through in every way I can. And on that note, I'd be most grateful if you would agree the recommendations in the paper in front of you, which follow para 412. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Now, I'm going to put the recommendation to you on ordered paper, page 9, please. I'm going to put all together A to F for your approval. Please show your hand. Thank you. Councillor Roy Perry to say a few words.
Kindly given to me by the commissioners, and it's engraved, and I think without my glasses I can just about read the inscription, which I'm told was words selected by Councillor Clifford, the leader of Rushmore Borough Council, and it says, "For I dip into the future, far as human eye could see, saw the vision of the world and all the wonder that would be," which is a quote from Tennyson. I can assure you that will have a very precious place in my home, and I'm extremely grateful to the commissioners for having made that wonderful presentation. There is also there a set of maps they have given to me, knowing my love of history, maps of Hampshire from, I think, the 4th century AD. I said the map I really want to see is the map of Hampshire in 2050. What will that be like? But thank you very much, commissioners. Really appreciate it.
Member, now we conclude the business of the council, and thank you very much for your attendance. Safe journey home.